colleagues, we feel privileged to participate in this mock trial that is similar to the role play, which is a speaking activity where we put ourselves in somebody else's shoes and made up situations. We are on the second trial of Mary Dyer, who has violated the Massachusetts law for the protection of the Bay Colony. The participants of this trial are Abrosimov Dmitry as the judge, Jmametova Albina as a prosecutor, Kizmova Milek as a clerk, Sabitova Albina and Sulemenko Yulia as witnesses, Chikmaev Natalia as a chief defense lawyer, and last but not least, Shestopalova Anna as the defendant. The setting is formal. The degree of familiarity is the second trial of Mary Dyer. The intention is to sentence a verdict whether she is guilty or not. Let us proceed to the mock trial and do not forget about the time limit. Thank you. All rise. The Superior Court of Massachusetts Bay is now in session. The Honorable Judge Dmitry is now in session. God save the King.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Calling the case of the people of the Massachusetts Bay versus Mary Dyer. Are both sides ready to begin our session?
Ready for the people, Your Honor.
Ready for the defense, Your Honor.
You may take your seats. Mary Dyer, how do you plead to the charges against you?
Not guilty, Your Honor.
Prosecution, you may proceed with the opening statement.
Thank you, Your Honor. The defendant has been charged with the crime of being a Quaker and in violation of the Massachusetts law for the protection of the Bay Colony, which states that the Quakers who return to Massachusetts Bay after being banished should be executed. The argument goes that in 1659, Mary Dyer and her companions arrived in Boston and were banished on pain to death. Then, on October 19, 1659, along with William Robinson and Marmaduke Stephenson, she returned to Boston again, and they were sentenced to death. Our main goal was to persuade her to abdicate her statements. That is why she was pardoned individually and sent off to Rhode Island. The point I'd like to make is that Mary Dyer refused to accept the reprieve unless the anti-Quaker law was repealed, and now she returned again. Our ultimate goal today is to establish Mary Dyer's guilt. As being a Quaker, she knowingly broke the law several times, even though the court and the judges showed her mercy on 2 occasions and personally pardoned her. So today we are about to carry out a judgment. The evidence I present will prove to you that Mary Dyer is guilty as charged. Thank you.
Thank you. You may take your seat. Defense, now it is time for your statement.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen, under the law, my client is presumed innocent until proven guilty. During this trial, you will hear no real evidence against Mary Dyer. You will come to know the truth that Mary has practiced her faith in a different manner, and actually she meant no harm. Therefore, my client is not guilty. Thank you.
Thank you. The prosecution may call its first witness.
The people call Alice Brown.
Please stand. Raise your right hand. Do you promise that the testimony you shall give in the court in this, you shall give in the case before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I do.
Please state your first and last name.
I am Alice Brown.
Miss Brown, I would like to ask you a few questions about Mary Dyer. As you know, she was charged with the crime of being a Quaker and knowingly broke the law several times. Miss Brown, tell us please, what is your relation with the defendant?
Our relations were reduced to one meeting. We didn't talk tete-a-tete to each other. I got to know her by chance.
Thank you. Would you tell us how did you know each other?
On Sunday, I was on my way to home from the sermon. I never skip it as it is a vital part of our life, and those who skip have to pay fines. I noticed that there was a secret meeting. Then I saw Mary Dyer, who promoted Quakers' values and beliefs, and she also tried to provoke public outcry against the law prohibiting the Quakers to penetrate in the Puritan community. I realized that our community frowned on dissidents. That is why I tried to leave the venue as soon as possible.
So you claim that Quakers' values and beliefs are alien to you, right?
I do.
And you left this meeting afterwards.
I did.
Did you happen to attend to the meeting by the news afterwards?
I never visited those meetings, Dan. I'm a law-abiding Puritan, and I tend to believe that dissidence is totally unacceptable. Our ultimate goal is to establish an ideal religious society, and we should focus on defining the borders of our new towns, implementing criminal legislation, and warding off Indian threat. We can't allow dwelling on theology issues and avoid practical issues. If we allow dissidence, it will totally ruin our community.
Thank you, Miss Brown, and I would like to ask you my final question. Do you think that if Mary Dyer were set free this time, that she would respect the religious beliefs of the Puritans of Massachusetts Bay Colony and stay out of the colony?
It seems to me she wouldn't. Quakers' raison d'etre is to suffer being alive in order to enjoy blissful happiness after passing away. If she had been the person who would strive for living longer, she wouldn't have come back again.
Thank you. Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Then you may have your seat. Defense, would you like to cross-examine the witness?
No questions for Miss Brown, thank you, Your Honor.
Then the witness is excused.
Your Honor, the people call Jane Oliver.
I invite Jane Oliver to the witness stand.
Please stand. Raise your right hand. Do you promise that the testimony you shall give in the case before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
No oath could turn a liar into a man of truth. From the notion that oaths are futile, we come to believe that oaths are actually vicious. We object that requiring a man to be sworn to provide legal insurance of his truthfulness somehow imply that he is a liar when not under oath.
The witness refused to take the oath. Please state your first and last name.
My name is Jane Oliver.
Miss Oliver, I would like to ask you a few questions too, if you don't mind. Today, you're advocating for Mary Dyer, and my first question is, how do you know the defendant?
Anne Hutchinson introduced me to the defendant, Mary Dyer. During the trial of Anne Hutchinson in 1638, Mary was one of the few who defended her, and when Anne was expelled from the colony and went to Rhode Island, Mary, her family, and me followed her.
Thank you. You mentioned that Anne Hutchinson introduced you to the defendant. Isn't it true that Anne herself was banished from Massachusetts Bay in 1635?
It is true.
And my last question for you is, do you know why she was banished from the colony?
She was banished from Massachusetts Bay and fled to Rhode Island for a few reasons. God spoke to her directly that some of the Puritan ministers were sinners, and because she held religious meetings with women in the colony. Her women's club meetings were seen as a threat of the authority of men in power and against the fundamental ideas of the Puritan way of life.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Then you may have your seat. Does the defense have an urge to cross-examine the witness?
We do, thank you, Your Honor. Miss Oliver, do you think that the laws of Massachusetts Bay are fair?
I fear none but the great God, and believe that God will ruin Massachusetts Bay and this whole state.
Thank you, Miss Oliver. Miss Oliver, would you say that Miss Dyer is a good and decent woman?
Mary Dyer is a good and decent woman. At any time of her life, this remarkable female has never committed the smallest public indiscretion. She lived out the will of God. She has suffered her share of disappointments, but she is perfectly comfortable in her position and doesn't balk at its constraints. She was sustained a lifetime on her pinnacle. She wears a corset of responsibility which can never be discarded. For me, Mary Dyer is a repository of wisdom, and her wisdom hounded her to her death, and it's a blessing for us. It's a pure pleasure. Every Quaker dreamed to be in her place, and we will.
Thank you, Miss Oliver. Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen, the evidence speaks for itself. No further questions for Miss Oliver.
Defense, you may take your seat. Jane Oliver, you are excused. You may take your seat. Does the defense has any other witnesses?
No, Your Honor. I call the defendant.
Please stand. Raise your right hand. Do you promise that the testimony you shall give in the case before this court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I will not take the oath, as Christ our Lord said. Swear not at all, but let your communication be yea, yea, and nay, nay. For whatsoever is more than this cometh of evil.
The defendant refused to take the oath. Please state your first and last name.
My name is Mary Dyer.
Are you the same Mary Dyer that was here before?
I am the same Mary Dyer that was the last general court, Your Honor.
You will own yourself a Quaker, will you not?
I own myself reproachfully called so, Your Honor.
Now, I believe it is time for the defense to cross-examine the defendant.
Thank you, Your Honor. Miss Dyer, why are you on trial today?
I was arrested because I continued professing my Quaker's beliefs and was encouraging people to stand against unjust laws of Massachusetts Bay Colony.
Miss Dyer, is this the first time that you have been put on trial? Why were you tried the first time?
It is not my first trial. I was on trial last year on October the 19th in 1659, where I was sentenced with my two brothers in faith, William Robinson and Marmaduke Stephenson, to death by hanging. But instead, I was reprieved and banished from the colony, and I was warned that should I return, I would be hanged.
Miss Dyer, do you think that a moral person has an obligation to oppose unjust laws?
I do believe that a truly moral person has an obligation to oppose unjust laws. I follow the will of God, who told me of violence inflicted on my brothers and sisters in faith, because they were professing different values and beliefs. It is my duty to help and defend them, and to stand against the authorities who, by their actions, inflict violence on my brothers and sisters and undermine the values and fundamentals of Christianity.
Thank you.
Does the defense rest?
Yes, Your Honor.
Then we proceed to prosecution.
Thank you. I have a few questions for Miss Dyer too. Miss Dyer, could you tell us about your values and beliefs as a Quaker colony representative, so we can understand your motives?
We, the Quakers, believe that the light of God is in everyone, and everyone can communicate with God personally. We do not need any mediators between our souls and God Himself. That is why we do not need churches, we do not need ministers, and we do not need to pray, as God will hear us without any additional help from the outside. And if God and His light lives in everyone, and if God lives in everyone, it means that we all are equal, and we treat other people the same we treat ourselves, despite their occupation or position. We accept everyone, even if their beliefs do not fully correspond with our own ones. We do not judge these people if they disagree with our values, and we are patient with them. We seek peace, good and welfare for everyone, as Jesus Christ said, He that taketh the sword shall perish by the sword. The vengeance is in Lord's hands, and He will repay those who hurt His people and wrong the innocent. Therefore cannot we avenge but suffer in His name's sake. That is why our ultimate goal in this world is to follow the light of God. But to set out on the path of salvation, we have to purify our souls, and one way to do so is to suffer for the sake of God's name. That's how we can achieve our salvation in this world and in the next one.
I see, thank you. Miss Dyer, as a Quaker, you believe that martyrdom is essential for the individual journey towards salvation, and that Quakerism is for the chosen ones. So don't you think that your beliefs are dangerous for the entire community?
I do not believe that our values and beliefs are dangerous. As I have already said, we seek peace, good and welfare for everyone. Our purpose is to find light of God in ourselves and help others to find it too. We want them to find their salvation and to save their souls and convince them that there are no mediators between them and God Himself.
Thank you. So many times you claim that our anti-Quaker law should be prohibited. So I would like to ask you, how do you feel about the laws of Massachusetts Bay Colony?
They seem inhuman to me, as in case of anti-Quakers law, they restrict people's right for freedom. My brothers and sisters in faith face violence just because they profess other values and beliefs. And we Quakers are banished from the colony under the threat of death penalty if we do not give up our beliefs.
My last but not least question for you would be about your motives again. Why do you keep going back to Massachusetts Bay knowing that you may be put to death? You unknowingly broke the laws and sentenced to death penalties. Your heirs were hanged and you have returned here again.
I keep coming back to Massachusetts Bay Colony because I am willing to prove that your laws are unjust and wicked and inhuman, and to make you repeal such unrighteous laws, such as anti-Quakers law that prohibits my brothers and sisters in faith from entering the colony, thus violating their freedom. If I'm banished again, I will come back again and will insist on repealing such a wicked law and against God's people, and I'm even ready to offer up my life for that purpose.
Thank you.
Does the prosecution rest?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mary Dyer, you are excused. You will be summoned later after the final statements. Please take your seat. Ladies and gentlemen, now I'm going to read you the rights, and you must follow in deciding this case. To prove the crime charged against the defendant Mary Dyer, the prosecution must prove first things to you. First, that the defendant is guilty beyond the reasonable doubt, that she violated the Massachusetts law for the protection of the Bay Colony. Second, that the defendant adheres to the false religion. And third, that the defendant intended to affect and ruin the way of life of the Massachusetts Bay. If each of you believes that the prosecution proved all these things beyond a reasonable doubt, and then you should find the defendant guilty. But if you believe the prosecution did not prove any of these points beyond reasonable